Should I die as a result of a violent crime, I request that the person or persons found guilty of homicide for my killing not be subject to or put in jeopardy of the death penalty under any circumstance, no matter how heinous their crime or how much I have suffered.
Some murders shake a town, some shake a nation, but today's, it just might have shaken heaven. It's the story of a priest and a so-called career criminal. When faith meets violence, when mercy meets murder, what happens when a saint crosses paths with a monster? Father Rene Robert wasn't just a priest though. He was a symbol of peace, a man his community called a literal living saint. He baptized babies, married members of his community, sat beside their loved ones as they took their final last breaths. But that wasn't all. His calling went much deeper. He believed in helping the ones most of us turn away from, the addicts, the ex-cons, the forgotten, the dangerous. He saw lost souls where others see as threats. Now, some people admired him for that. Others, including those closest to him, worried he was playing with fire and that his compassion might get him killed. They were ultimately right. In 2016, Father Rene crossed paths with a man who seemed the very embodiment of the darkness he tried to heal. A violent, volatile figure named Stephen Murray. A hardened repeat offender, a man with demons he didn't bother to hide. And when a saint offered him a hand, the predator took his life. But what makes the story so chilling isn't just the brutality of the crime itself, and make no mistake, it was brutal, it's the tragic irony that a man who devoted his entire life to helping others, who believed that no one was beyond saving, was murdered by the very type of person he was trying to save. Even in death, Father Rene stayed true to his faith, though. He had signed a declaration years before, asking that if he were ever murdered, his killer not be sentenced to death. He believed that death doesn't justify death, that mercy should never end, even beyond the grave. He spared his own killer's life, even after losing his own. In every murder, there's a victim and a perpetrator. But this one, it feels more like good versus evil. This is the story of Father Rene Robert and the darkness that swallowed a saint. Because one thing is certain, when your fate is sealed, there's no turning back. The gavel has fallen. I'm Nichole Mondshein, and this is Final Judgment, a deep dive into the final days, last choices, and chilling moments before execution on Georgia's death row. Some convictions unravel, while some sentences are overturned. The evidence has been laid bare, the jury has spoken. But was justice truly served? For some, there's no appeal, no second chances, just the final judgment. But for others, the final judgment isn't so final after all. Father Rene Robert wasn't just a man of God. He was a man who lived the gospel, lived and breathed the gospel every single day. He didn't just speak about compassion, he practiced it fiercely, faithfully, especially toward those most of us would rather try to avoid. He was a man who lived like Christ told us to, not just in word, but in action. He didn't preach from a place of comfort. He followed the gospel into the margins, to the deaf, to the poor, the imprisoned, the people society forgot about, the people Jesus specifically told us to serve. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says, "I was in prison and you visited me. Whatever you did for the last of these, you did for me." And Father Rene took those words literally. Born in upstate New York in 1944, he knew by the age of 3 that he wanted to serve God. He became an altar boy, then entered seminary straight out of high school. By his early 20s, he'd already begun living out his calling, and he would spend the next 5 decades walking the hardest paths, not away from the suffering, but straight toward it. He traveled from New York to Alabama, Pittsburgh to Wisconsin, eventually settling in Florida, dedicating decades of his life to teaching, serving, and healing, always placing himself wherever the need was the greatest. He was adopted as a young boy by Bernadette and Dune Robert. From the very beginning, his life was rooted in love, not just given, but chosen. Father Rene Robert's devotion to God didn't come later in life. It was there right from the start. And one group he felt especially drawn to was the deaf community. People often overlooked, even within the church. He didn't just want to preach to them, he wanted to understand them, so he learned their language, literally. Over the years, Father Rene earned degrees in deaf education and theology. He even learned sign language to specifically minister to the deaf community. He taught, counseled, and ministered to deaf Catholics in cities across the country. He worked in schools, led religious education programs, and served as a spiritual guide for those who didn't always have one. In 1980, he was ordained as a deacon. Then, 9 years later, he became a Catholic priest. He continued his ministry in Florida, where he'd spend the rest of his life, not only working with the deaf, but also reaching out to others society had forgotten about. That included people coming out of prison, felons, convicts, prostitutes, people with long rap sheets. But the priest didn't care. He offered them rides, housing, money, but most of all, he offered them dignity. To the people who knew him, Father Rene was quiet, humble, endlessly kind. One bishop called him a humble and generous servant of our Lord. Another said he always saw the good in the people he served, reminding them that God created them for greatness. Parishioners say he had a Franciscan heart, simple, gentle, endlessly loving, and perhaps more than anything, he believed no soul was beyond saving. Now he had his quirks. A New York Yankees cap was practically part of his uniform. He loved cheese, like really. He loved it. He even put it on anything, even salmon, and he was known to dig through people's trash to make sure they were recycling. He could be persistent, but behind all of that was this simple, stubborn love for people, all people. And if there's one thing I hope you take from this story, it's how Father Rene saw the world. Not through fear or judgment, but with radical compassion. He believed with his whole heart, soul, and being that every human being is a child of God. He sought out anyone who was neglected, marginalized, and felt unloved or abandoned. A fellow pastor and a colleague of his said when describing Father Rene. After settling in St. Augustine, Florida in 1995, Father Rene became a priest of the Diocese of St. Augustine. To the people of St. Augustine, Father Rene Robert wasn't just a priest, though. He was a presence, someone who made you feel seen, even when the world looked past you. They called him a living saint, not because he was perfect, but because he practiced the kind of faith most of us only talk about. The kind that runs toward the hurting, the broken, the forgotten. He ministered at the Florida School for the Deaf and Blind, and he even served as the chaplain at the school while also assisting at the San Sebastian Catholic Church and the Cathedral Balicia of St. Augustine. He even helped establish the first weekly Spanish-speaking masses in the St. Augustine area. He served in parishes across St. Augustine up until he retired in 2012. But even though he retired, he still wasn't done serving the Lord and helping others. To those whom he ministered, Father Rene will be remembered for his kindness and endless love for them. He always saw the good in the people he served, reminding them that God created them for greatness with a good and noble purpose for others. Bishop Estevez said, and like I mentioned, he had a soft spot for the people most of us are taught to fear, especially ex-convicts, addicts, and inmates. And while some saw his mercy as naive, others recognized it as something much deeper, a radical, unwavering belief in redemption. He didn't just preach that no soul was beyond saving, he actually lived it. He spent his entire life helping others, especially those most people wouldn't even go near, the unwanted, the outcasts of society. He believed everyone deserved grace, that no one was beyond redemption, and that included helping people recently released from prison. And not just with prayer, but with rides, money, food, and even a place to stay. That kind of trust worried those closest to him. Even the local sheriff, who was a longtime friend, warned that the priest might be putting himself and life in danger. He was out there ministering to people everyone else gave up on, prostitutes, convicts, drug addicts. When I warned him, he told me, "I am doing what God is telling me to do." And I believed him. He died doing what he loved. St. Johns County Sheriff David Sawyer said. But Father Rene didn't judge. That was the whole point. And that's what makes what happened to him so devastating. Because it wasn't an enemy who took his life. It was someone he tried to save countless times. So when he crossed paths with a troubled 28-year-old man named Stephen Murray, someone freshly out of prison with a history of violence and instability, Father Rene didn't hesitate to help him, even when others, including his own family, suggested that he be cautious. but this time mercy would cost him everything. And what makes the story even more haunting is that somehow, deep down, Father Rene may have even seen his tragic fate coming decades earlier. But before we get there, I think it's important to know more about the man who decided to murder this man of God, Stephen James Murray. Stephen Murray didn't become a killer overnight. He was raised in a storm of violence, abuse, and fear. Some people are broken by what they survive. Others are shaped by it. Stephen Murray wasn't just raised around violence, he was taught it, conditioned by it, and eventually consumed by it. And the truth is, once you hear about his childhood and upbringing, Stephen Murray never really had a chance. His childhood wasn't just traumatic, it was a blueprint for destruction. Stephen grew up in Aiken, South Carolina, and from the outside, it looked like any other rural, southern, small-town childhood. A little trailer on 5 acres of land in South Carolina, a working-class family, kids dressed neatly enough, a cross in their yard that read Jesus Saves, but behind closed doors, it was a nightmare. Stephen and his siblings would recall later in life. Stephen was the second born of 4 children, 2 boys, including him, and 2 sisters. Stephen Murray grew up in a house where fear was the air he and his siblings breathed. His father, Bobby James Murray, was a tree trimmer by trade and a literal monster by every other account. Violent, controlling, drunk. According to 3 of his 4 children, he also sexually abused them. Stephen says he was just 7 years old when his father picked him up from school one day and gave him what he said was a twisted lesson in manhood. Beer, cigarettes, and sexually assaulted him for the very first time. The kind of abuse that doesn't just hurt. It warps, it infects, it scars. It shapes you as a person and ultimately the rest of your life. But Stephen was actually the only one of the Murray children not to report his father's sexual abuse to police at the time. But later on in his life, he said this regarding that abuse. "I was just an itty-bitty kid and I felt like I had a monster on my back," he said. "I'd pray so much that my knees would be sore. I'd be praying my whole life," he said. There were no neighbors close enough to hear the kids screaming, no one to see their bruises, no one to stop what was happening. So Stephen and his siblings prayed. He said he prayed until his knees were sore, but the nights just kept getting worse and worse. The children were raised like inmates. After school wasn't for play, it was for cleaning, scrubbing walls, shining floors, doing anything to avoid setting their father off. Because if their father wasn't happy with how the chores were done, he'd throw plates or punches or whatever or whoever was within reach. Stephen described his childhood as a living hell. Even their mother, Mary Lynn, couldn't protect them. She was also being beaten and abused as well. However, she eventually did get the courage to escape and divorce Bobby, but she would later die of a heart attack in 2014 at just 47 years old. Thousands of pages of social service records unsealed with the consent of Stephen's sisters help paint a chilling portrait of the Murray household. Investigators, caseworkers, and the children themselves all described a home soaked in trauma, where the lines between discipline, violence, and abuse had long since disappeared. Although their father, Bobby James Murray, was never criminally charged for sexually abusing his children, multiple sheriff's investigators who worked their cases over the years said they firmly believed the abuse occurred. The files, alongside interviews with 3 of the 4 Murray siblings, revealed a very tragic pattern. None of the children ended up finishing high school, and 3 of them had extensive criminal records. 2 have been charged with murder, including Stephen, which we will get to here in a little bit. Bobby Jean Murray, one of Stephen's sisters, put it like this regarding their childhood. "He messed us all up. We didn't have a childhood. We were getting molested or beaten or locked out of our own house in the heat. And now I have 2 brothers in jail. We've been dealing with this crap our whole lives. My sister and I know that we are blessed to be strong and we're able to move on with our lives. But my brothers, unfortunately, they didn't know how to." By 11, Stephen was already committing crimes and facing time behind bars. But oddly enough, he liked it. Jail felt safer for him than home did, and so began a lifetime in and out of lockup, bouncing between detention centers and prison cells. After every release, he would quickly look for a new way to get himself locked up right back at it again. For him, it felt more like freedom. Any chance he could get away from his father, he took. But the state called it a rap sheet. But he did everything he could to try to get away from the hell he called it living with his abusive father. By 14, Stephen started doing crack with his father, and by 15, he claims he started hearing voices and was declared mentally incompetent and given antipsychotic drugs. The state said he had the mind of a third grader. Stephen's own mother even called him, quote-unquote, retarded. His behavior, erratic, violent, and increasingly disturbing as time went on. And soon enough, the pain and abuse that his own father inflicted on him, Stephen would then be inflicting on others. Later on in his life, Stephen would even admit to raping women, including his own sisters. He claims he once hogtied his sister and left her unconscious in a closet. He killed animals, as we know, an early sign of violent behavior in children, destroyed property, choked people he claimed to love. And yet every time he was released, the streets and the drugs pulled him back in. He didn't finish school, he couldn't hold down a job, and by his late 20s, he had spent more time of his life inside a prison than out, literally becoming a so-called frequent flyer behind bars and being known as a so-called career criminal. After one of his last stints in a South Carolina prison, Stephen ended up heading south to Northeast Florida. He said he was looking for a fresh start, a clean slate, but anyone who knew him knew that this was highly unlikely. Likely, history would quickly repeat itself and Stephen would likely be behind bars once again before he even saw it coming. He briefly moved in with his sister, Bobby Jean, but their already fractured relationship would crumble even more. She had seen it all before, Stephen's lies, the outbursts, the chaos. So within weeks, she kicked him out, saying she was done with her brother's reckless and violent behavior. And just like that, Stephen began to spiral again. He was broke, angry, unstable. The streets of Jacksonville, Florida, and the drug scene that came with it welcomed him back like an old friend. Meth, heroin, paranoia, violence. He didn't have much, but he knew how to survive in the underworld and the chaos. That was his comfort zone. That was his home. Years later, Stephen would repeatedly blame his father for ruining his life. But this just wasn't shifting just blame. It was trauma speaking. Because Stephen wasn't just born into a dysfunctional household. He was raised in it, consumed by it. His childhood was filled with unspeakable abuse, fear, and instability. There's something chilling about a life that feels kind of cursed from birth, where trauma isn't the exception, it's the routine. And while that trauma doesn't excuse what he would eventually do, it does begin to explain how a man could grow up so lost, so broken, so angry. But as we all know, not everyone who suffers abuse as a child later becomes a killer. At some point, bouncing from motel to motel in Jacksonville, Stephen met a woman named Ashley. Like him, Ashley had a rough and unstable past and a serious heroin addiction. But they were a match made in misery. Two people chasing their next fix, with little hope for the future. And it was Ashley who was actually the one who introduced Stephen to someone who seemed like he was from another world entirely, Father Rene Robert. Literally heaven versus hell. The beloved priest had met Ashley years earlier through one of her family members seeking help for her addiction. And over time, he tried, maybe a little too hard, to save her. Stephen said Ashley described Father Rene as a pushover, someone she could easily manipulate. She even bragged, allegedly, that she could get whatever she wanted from him. And yet, Father Rene helped anyway, because that's just who he was. He gave her money, rides, food. He even let Ashley use his car on occasion. At one point, she even had access to his checkbook. She even had a credit card in her name, but the bills still went to Father Rene's house. That's how much Father Rene wanted to help her. But Ashley's own mother would later say that the priest, in trying to help, had only enabled her daughter's addiction. She said she warned Father Rene for years to stay away from Ashley, but he didn't. Because, again, like I've been saying, he believed in redemption, even when no one else did. Around the same time, Father Rene also began helping Stephen. And just like Ashley's mother, Stephen's sister had begged the priest to back away. Bobby Jean had seen her brother unravel way too many times, and she didn't want the priest to be caught in the crosshairs. But again, Father Rene was hopeful that he could help save Stephen. But what happens when someone who's lived in darkness his entire life is offered light for the very first time? And what happens when a man raised by monsters meets a man who most would consider a saint, who all consider a saint? In the days leading up to the murder, Stephen's sister claims that she had warned Father Rene directly, "Don't give him money, stay away, he's about to lose control." And she would be right. In early April 2016, Stephen had just lost his landscaping job after yet another brief jail stint at the Duval County Jail. With no money to pay the motel and no one left to lean on, his world started closing in on him again. But this time, Ashley was gone, sent to prison in late March on a 5-year sentence for probation violations. And his sister, Bobby Jean, had cut him off completely. And even Father Rene, who had always answered Stephen's beck and calls and cries for help, had started to say no to Stephen's request and again cries for help, marking that boundary. So with nowhere left to turn, he had no choice but to turn to his own father, a man who he absolutely hated to ask for help. According to Stephen, at that time, his back was against the wall. He needed help from someone, even if it was the man who he claims ruined his life. But eventually, Stephen would snap, and what happened next would shake the entire community and leave behind a trail of grief, horror, and betrayal, how one final act of mercy ended in murder. Things started to unravel on April 12, 2016. Father Rene Robert, then 71 years old, had promised to lead a funeral service that day, but he never showed up, something completely out of character for him. And he wasn't answering his phone either. Friends immediately knew something was wrong and contacted the police. One of the first we notified was the local sheriff, a close friend of Father Rene's who had once warned him about offering help to dangerous people. And he quickly assigned his best detectives to the case to help find his friend. But by then, Father Rene had already been missing for 2 days.
I can help you. Sure. Can I get somebody to do a wellness check? Okay. And what's the person's name? His name is Father Rene Robert. I think my brother might have done something to hurt him and stole his car and everything. He made the comment to my dad that Father Rene was tied up. Do you mean that he's busy? Physically tied up. Physically. And my brother is just crazy enough to do that. He tied my sister up a couple years back and tried to kill her. That's what we're afraid of, that he might have hurt the old man. Yes, ma'am. I called last night to have a well check done on Father Rene Robert in St. Augustine, and nobody ever called me back to let me know the verdict of that.
One time, okay.
And
His vehicle was also not there.
Mr. Rene Roberts is not answering his phone still. We're worried about that man.
I got a phone call from my sergeant at the time, and he told us we had a missing priest. And when he told me who it was, it kind of set me back on my heels a little bit.
We made contact with the person who cleaned his apartment, and patrol deputies went inside the apartment with her, and he was not there. I noticed there were some couple of drawers that were pulled out. There was mail everywhere. There was food on the kitchen counter, which appeared that somebody may have taken a bite or two and kind of just left it there.
There was no obvious signs of a struggle. There was no blood. So it looked like he could have just up and left.
What investigators didn't know yet was that on April 10th, just days earlier, Stephen Murray had called him, asking to be picked up in Jacksonville, Florida. According to Stephen, he wanted to repay the priest some money that he had owed him. But there were some warning signs. Father Rene reportedly hesitated and said no at first, a rare move for a man known for his unshakable generosity. But ultimately, he got in his car and drove to pick Stephen up. But what followed was a chaotic and tragic spiral of drug use, desperation, and violence. Stephen says he drove Father Rene to a rough neighborhood to buy some drugs, deliberately dropping him off nearby so that the priest wouldn't have to see what was going on. But you can imagine it. After scoring cocaine and marijuana, Stephen picked the priest up once again, but instead of turning around, he headed north toward South Carolina. But this wasn't a mutual road trip. By Stephen's own account, he took Father Rene against his will. Somewhere along the way, he forced the priest into the trunk of his own car, disabling the emergency release so that he couldn't escape. Stephen claimed he wanted to see his children, one of whom he had never met at that point, who were living in South Carolina at the time. But when he arrived in Aiken County, the children's grandfather refused to let him see him. It was a breaking point. From there, Stephen spiraled, breaking into homes, stealing guns, and getting high again, going on a crime spree. And through it all, Father Rene was still in the trunk, shouting, crying, repeating over and over, "You'll never get away with this. You'll go back to prison." And that's when Stephen reportedly snapped. He later told investigators that the priest's words had somewhat hit a nerve with him, that it felt like the life he was trying to hold on to was already gone. Afraid, angry, and high, he drove into a wooded area along River Road in Burke County, Georgia. There, he opened the trunk, let Father Rene out, and followed him into the woods. And unfortunately, that's where he shot him. First in the chest, then in the head, killing the priest, a man who was just offering his help, his guidance. Stephen later claimed Father Rene never even saw that he had a gun. Afterwards, Stephen claims he cried out for forgiveness, calling on God. Then he had called his sister in a panic, repeating, "I just gave my life away." But even then, it wasn't over. Instead of turning himself in, Stephen fled back to Jacksonville, Florida, where he said he was prepared to go on a killing spree, even claiming he wanted police to kill him. That night, deputies spotted him driving Father Rene's blue Toyota Corolla. A high-speed chase then ensued, reaching speeds over 100 miles per hour and involving more than a dozen officers. Stephen weaved through traffic, ran red lights, and tried to bait the police into crashing.
Behind the signal aid vehicle, we got a Corolla, blue in color. We're on 207 headed towards 95, and looks like he doesn't want to stop.
We're talking he's doing 115, 120 miles an hour on I-95. It's a high-stress situation.
We knew that it was not Father Rene driving. He would never flee from a traffic stop.
We'd get close enough to see there was a white male individual in the driver's seat, but we could not identify him.
I've got him right in front of me. 433 here. Where you need that vehicle stopped.
We suspected the driver may be Stephen Murray, but we were not sure 100%.
If you can't safely do that, I want you to back off. It's not worth it. All right, we're in the construction zone. We're going to have to slow it down, guys. Four. We lost him in the construction. We all backed off.
It was a little bit frustrating and upsetting. Whoever was driving the car was a critical piece of the puzzle for us to be able to get to where Father Rene was.
Eventually, he slipped away and disappeared into the night.
So tell me who Father Rene is to you.
So the first time I talked to Father Rene was right after I had my brother arrested. When I asked him to not bond him out, we wanted him to stay there and dry out. My brother is Stephen Murray.
Okay.
My brother got out. He got released from jail. And Father Rene called me when he got out. My brother had already contacted him for money and rides and stuff like that.
Okay.
She told the detectives that Father Rene had become involved with individuals that were troubled per se, that had been in jail. He always tried to actually help him recover, get on the right path. And Father Rene was trying to help Stephen with drug addiction and drug use.
So what made you call the sheriff's office?
My dad came over, and my brother had been staying over there with them since he got released from jail. And so I asked him, how Stephen was doing. He said Stephen left with Father Rene the night before, and that was the last time he'd seen him. I've been dialing his number ever since, like for the past 2 days, and it's going straight to voicemail.
Okay.
And so I'm like, oh my gosh, what if this man is hurt? Stephen is a violent person.
Okay.
So, we just feel like he might have hurt that man.
Does your dad know about all this?
We got a feeling he does, but we think he's trying to cover up for my brother.
And then the next day, on April 13th, he turned up at a gas station in South Carolina. A state trooper noticed his damaged vehicle and let him go without a warning. But the net was already closing in on him. That afternoon, after breaking into a mobile home, stealing more weapons, and setting the place on fire, Stephen fled once again, this time crashing the car into a tree near his cousin's home. That's when he ran into the woods, but was eventually tracked by bloodhounds and spotted by a neighbor. As the manhunt intensified, word spread fast in Aiken County, South Carolina. Locals were on edge and some were armed. One of Stephen Murray's own relatives, Mary Davis, sat on her porch with a pistol in her lap, warning him to stay away. She heard tapping from the woods, a faint sound that confirmed what many neighbors had feared, that Stephen was in the area and he was close. He was nearby. As police swarmed the area, He tried to knock on neighbors' doors looking for refuge, but no one wanted to let him in. One woman immediately called 911 saying, "It's the guy they're looking for, something about a missing priest." But what no one knew yet at the time, except for Stephen Murray, was that Father Rene was already dead. But he would eventually be caught and was arrested just before midnight.
So damn sore, man. I gave them people a hell of a run last night.
Oh, they were joking about it. They say you were running like a gazelle out of that car.
Man.
But that running circles around the dog, man.
It's smart though, because it slows them down, you know, because it takes them a minute to get back on track.
So where do you learn that?
No, but man, you just learn. A dog would get confused real easy. Of course, them dogs wouldn't have got me anyway. I was just standing there watching. I'm about 40 feet up there in the tree, just looking down watching.
Seriously?
The whole sheriff
Climbing in the dark?
If you get me, then you're not gonna get me. I'll die before they get me. I'll make my mind up from the start, you know, man.
But do you choose to stop and give up?
No, I'm just the gentleman, you know, the gentleman rush. All these people trying to get me, you know. If I want to let them get me, but not. And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
Criminals, they are proud of their accomplishments. He's proud of how far he was able to get away from them. Give somebody a chance to brag, placate their ego a little bit and get them talking. And, you know, even if they're like, yeah, that was me running. Yeah, all right, there we got a confession.
And ironically, as investigators closed in on Stephen Murray during the manhunt tied to Father Rene Roberts' then disappearance, his own father, Bobby James Murray, was facing his own troubles with the law as well. While Stephen was on the run, Bobby was arrested back in Jacksonville, Florida, on a warrant for lewd behavior at a motel that he had called home. According to that arrest report, Bobby was seen exposing himself near a pool where some children were swimming. Witnesses say he sat in a chair, hand moving inside his pants for about 10 minutes or so before fully exposing himself in plain sight in front of everyone. Of course, parents were alarmed and quickly ushered their kids away and alerted management. It wasn't just disturbing, it was another dark chapter in a family history already marked by abuse, especially sexual abuse. And the timing of his arrest was chilling. As police searched for Stephen, hoping to track down the missing priests, they instead found Stephen's own father ensnared in his own crime. Hours later, Stephen himself would be captured hundreds of miles away in South Carolina, again after that high-speed chase, in Father Roberts' car. Though Bobby was released from jail that same evening with conditions to avoid the victims and the motel pool, the story underscores a haunting realization. While authorities hunted the son accused of violence, his own father, was being unmasked for his own predatory behavior. For Stephen, who grew up under the weight of all this prolonged abuse, the sins of his father seem impossible to separate from the path of destruction he would later carve for himself. But it didn't stop there. About a year after that arrest, Bobby faced more serious charges: sexual assault and kidnapping. These weren't isolated or one-off incidents. They obviously show us a pattern of behavior, a deepening of misconduct that casts a long shadow over the family. For Stephen and his siblings, this wasn't just about a single moment of exposure. It was a childhood scarred by reoccurring allegations, by betrayal, and by the omnipresent threat of abuse: physical, mental, emotional, and sexual. While at this point, Stephen Murray's crimes have taken center stage, the story of his father, Bobby, reveals a disturbing backdrop that helps explain, though never excuse, much of the trauma Stephen and his siblings endured. When you see Stephen now, his desperation, his actions, it becomes clear. He grew up in a home where boundaries were broken, trust was violated, and innocence was under constant threat. No child should have to endure that. Now, again, it doesn't justify what he's accused of doing, what he was convicted of doing, but it helps explain the weight he's carried for years, especially up to this point. The rage, the fear, and perhaps even the madness and sadness he had inside.
Did you think Stephen would be capable of doing something like that?
I knew he was capable, but I didn't know how far he would go.
Bobby Jean Murray knows him as her little brother.
It's really the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, because I'm the one that turned him in.
In April of 2016, Father Rene Robert went missing. His body would soon be found in the deep woods south of Augusta, Georgia, nearly 300 miles from his St. Augustine home.
I'm actually the one that contacted the police to do a well check on Father Rene.
Bobby knew her brother was with Father Robert. She says Stephen met the 71-year-old priest through a girlfriend, and he had helped them out many times.
Father Rene came every time they called, whether it was money or rides or whatever, it didn't matter.
Bobby says her siblings hid pain behind their smiles. She described a home where abuse was common. She says Stephen stayed in trouble and spent most of his time behind bars.
He did that most of his childhood just to get away from home. I guess, being incarcerated was his safe place.
At first, Stephen said very little to investigators.
I mean, what are we talking about?
Well, we're here and we're conducting an investigation and
On Father Rene.
on Father Rene. And we need your help to
Try to find him.
try to find him.
Okay.
How do you meet him?
This girl I was with. He was like, look, I got this guy, he gives me money. He's an old man, he's a priest, and he looks out for me. And she said, you want to meet him? Sure, you giving her money, you helping me out. Saving me money, I mean, let's just be serious, and I can keep money in my pocket. So he came over, I met him. Me and him had a beer, we talked, and, I told him what was going on. He was a priest, and, I felt like, he wouldn't give me no wrong advice.
How did he treat you?
Always treat me good, love, respect, and, he was always a good man. He always helped me.
Did you love Father Rene?
I had a lot of love and respect for Father Rene. A lot. Because he was there when my sister wasn't. I was depressed. I was real bad down. And I said, can you help me? She said, I can't do nothing, Paul. I can't help. I felt betrayed, but that's tough love, but,
Maybe she thought that was the best for you, man. She cares for you.
she cared. I love her to death. And call Father Rene. When I couldn't depend on nobody else, he was there. I did have a lot of love for Father Rene.
He ever betray you?
No, never. He was a good, honest man, straight up, straightforward, straight going, he was that type of person.
I felt by watching his body language, he did have a conscience about what happened, because Father Rene was trying to do well for him, so that had got to him. We were hoping being able to kind of appeal to his sense of right and wrong, to kind of start his inner turmoil and conscious about helping us find Father Rene.
I never met the guy. We're just out here trying to find him, dead or alive. We're trying to make him met,
Understand.
So sometimes people respect you when you do the right thing. We're trying to let him know that he still has a big heart. He can help us bring Father Rene home and for us to provide closure to the family, but we were trying to play on his emotions.
What do you think he is right now?
If I know it, I'd be more than happy to help you. Because he meant as much to me as probably if he did anybody else that's out there looking for him.
There's a lot of people looking for him, and it's important that there's a closure for what happened to him.
Right, I understand that. If I had any help for you, I'd be more than happy to help you.
You're the last person I saw, and I think you can help me.
I can't. So if you're going to keep on trying to dig at me, then we ain't got nothing to talk about. I told you what I had to tell you. Digging's not going to get you nowhere. It's just going to put you in a hole.
So you have the one person that's done some good for you, missing.
I'll be fine in any way I can. I told you that. And I'll take you to where I dropped them off at.
Was he hurt when you dropped them off?
No.
Could you hurt him?
No. I mean, I don't think I would do anything like that to somebody who cares for me that much. I mean, no, I couldn't. I mean,
Because that will make you an animal. You don't want to be an animal,
I
right?
don't want to be. I mean, I'm telling you what I know. And if it's any help to you, then by God, I hope it is. But, you know, anything in addition to that, you know, if you want me to tell you anything other than that, it would be a lie. Okay? So you take that and you sleep on it, eat on it, whatever you gotta do. I mean, you know, y'all sitting there pushing and getting me nowhere. I mean, I want to push my way back to the bed.
Man. I'm not pushing you. I'm just telling you how things are. You know, I'm not pushing you by no means. I'm not trying to push you. I respect you as a man. I respect what you've told me. Okay? I hope that I've treated you with respect, the respect that you expected.
You know, I wanted to see what was going on. You know, they told me that Father Renee was missing, and you know, y'all just thinking I had something to do with it. So I said, hell,
Because
nigga.
you just admitted here a few minutes ago you were the last person to see him. You have his car.
I didn't say I was the last person to see him because
you have
when I
his
dropped
car.
him off, I mean, you know, there ain't no telling.
Well, nobody else called us and say there's a priest walking around here.
I think it's been a long day for all of us. Let's just be done. You
be done.
Do what you got to do. Go back to the thing, get some sleep, and go get some sleep.
Let's go.
But once he was brought back to Florida and allowed to speak to his sister, that's when the story came pouring out of him.
We're going through hell out here that we don't even deserve. People talking to us, talking about that we used to help cover up stuff and all, and we probably know where Father Renee is. We don't know how much more we can handle. I just broke down and cried yesterday because we don't deserve this. My kids don't deserve this.
Yeah, what do you want me to do? I mean, tell me.
I just want you to be honest with them, regardless of the situation. This ain't gonna be over with until they find Father Renee.
I love you with all my heart.
My cell phone rings, and I learned Stephen Murray has asked to speak to detectives. We didn't know about what, but he wanted to talk to us.
He had made a phone call to Bobby Jean, and I do believe that conversation with Bobby Jean could have been a very pivotal moment for Stephen. I was hoping that Stephen was ready to talk. He was getting ready to get it off his chest and tell us.
Okay. All right. It's your show, brother. We're just here to watch. Tell us.
Well, the first part of the story I told y'all where he picked me up. I was gonna pay him the money, which was true. I picked him up after I got back from the dope trap. Down on nothing. Went up to South Carolina. You know, so I wanted to see my kids.
Did he say he didn't want to go?
He said, no, boy, they didn't want to go. He just said, okay. I mean, I wasn't aggressive with it or anything. You know? I wanted to go see my kids.
Where's he at in the car?
He's in the trunk by that point.
He's in the trunk. Okay. Is he tied up or anything like that?
So,
how did you get him to get in the trunk?
asked him to.
Did you say or else?
He said, or else. He said, I need you to get in the trunk, Father Renee. He said, okay. And I'm not helping Renee. So he said, you still what I tell you to, and everything's gonna be okay. And, you know, I'm talking to him, you know, and he's still telling me, you know, that I'm in great trouble and I'm never gonna get away with this. And I'm thinking, you know, like, man, you know, maybe I'm in a great deal of trouble. I guess I got real skizzed out, man. Scared, I guess, you know. Scared for me, scared for my life.
Is there something that snaps in your head like, hey, I gotta take care of this, or this is gonna be a problem, or?
If you gonna go back and tell on me though, and get me in trouble, I mean,
So tell me about that. What happened with that?
Well, he's steady talking to the trunk, you know. He's hollering, I gotta use your bathroom. And I said, okay, you know, I'll let you out in just a second, you know. And so I stopped, you know, I use the bathroom. I had a 9mm and shot him.
Okay. So like me and you are looking at each other right now, and you shot him like that?
It was more of from the side. Fell and I shot him in the head.
Okay.
Left.
Just listening to Stephen talk about the way he murdered Father Rene in such a cold and callous way, it's one of the times in my career that I've actually felt the presence of evil in an interview room.
He soon confessed, telling police where they could find Father Rene's body half a mile into the Georgia woods. And then on April 18th, 2016, a week after the priest was killed, detectives recovered his remains. But to this day, Stephen Murray has never revealed where he hid the murder weapon.
Mr. Murray, you said you're sorry. Do you have anything else to say?
Very sorry, and if anybody really loves Father Rene, they'll forgive me because he was a man of God, and forgiveness is forgiveness.
What happened? You were in his car.
I had mental problems and I lost control of myself, and I apologize.
Mr. Murray, what did you do?
Forgive me.
Do you have anything else to say to the community?
In interviews from jail, Stephen shifts between remorse and defiance. He says he didn't mean to kill Father Rene, that it just happened. He blames his actions on a lifetime, unloading years of pain, of trauma, addiction, abuse, and untreated mental illness, claiming diagnoses like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and explosive rage disorder. But he also admits that nothing can undo what he did. Whether it was a crime of opportunity, a drug-fueled breakdown, or a calculated choice to silence the one person who had shown him mercy, the result was just the same. Father Rene was gone, and Stephen Murray knew he had reached the end of the line, the end of his crime spree.
I could have got away with the murder if I just kept my mouth shut. I'm riding, you know, and Father Rene, he's talking to me and telling me, you know, you're never gonna get away with this, you know, you're never gonna get away with this, you know. And I had no intention of hurting him, you know, no intention. You know?
Was he still in the trunk then?
Yeah, in that spot where y'all got him from, you know. And I backed up right there and he said he had to use the bathroom, you know, so I was gonna let him out and use the bathroom. Lost myself, you know. I shot him.
His killing spree. He mentioned his brother was also in prison for murder and that his sisters had distanced themselves from him. "I'm just a product of my life," he told investigators.
We had a rough past, you know, one that probably ain't even close to a nightmare for somebody. So he has problems, and I mean, unless you lived our life, you know, you really don't know what we went through.
He asked his interrogator the kind of question that reveals a deeply broken person trying to make sense of things. Why wasn't I safe from my childhood nightmares? And that officer would later describe this interrogation as heartbreaking. He truly broke my heart just seeing him in the state that he was in, knowing what he lived through. He was just spilling it out. We knew this all along. We just had nowhere to go with it. But she also saw the volatility in him. He would go from talking about the abuse and then he would just flip a switch. Some of the things that would come out of his mouth would just truly make a sailor blush. To her, Stephen seemed like two people in one. This person that you just want to put your arms around and hug, to this other person where you're like, oh my goodness, don't let him out because he is going to hurt another person.
I already know him. You have a right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. You have a right for an attorney. If you can't afford one, y'all will appoint me one. I got some weed, and I ended up getting some crack. We went up to South Carolina against his will. I mean, it wasn't...
What do you mean by that?
Against his will means he didn't have a choice.
Did he say he didn't want to go?
No, he said no point that he didn't want to go. He just said, okay.
How'd you get him to get in the trunk?
I just asked him to.
You just said, hey, I need you to get in that trunk right there?
I need you to get in that trunk, Father. And I really wanted to see my kids, and I know I was at a breaking point, you know, where I was just tired.
I feel you.
And I was just ready to die. By that time, Father Rene was saying that that I was in great trouble, like, I wasn't gonna be able to get out of this, and you know, and everything hit me, you know, and just wigged out, you know, and I killed him.
But as we piece together Stephen Murray's story, important questions remain, ones that don't have easy answers. Was Father Rene truly willing to help at every moment, or did he realize too late that he was in danger? Stephen gave conflicting accounts, at times saying the priest went along quietly, other times admitting that he had forced him into the trunk. And what about the killing itself? Was it planned or a sudden, impulsive act brought on by drugs and a mental health crisis? According to Stephen, he just lost control. But how much of this was about untreated trauma, and how much was cold, criminal intent? He says he's been diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and more, but in the eyes of the law, the only thing that matters is what he did. So where does the responsibility end and illness begin? That's the gray area we're left to wrestle with. This case shows us how someone scarred by a lifetime of violence, rejection, mental illness, and drug addiction can reach a point where, to them, they think there are no good options left, only desperation. But desperation alone doesn't explain the worst of what he did. It makes you think, was this murder a crime of impulse, or was there something more calculated underneath the surface? Did seeing Father Rene's kindness feel like weakness to him? Or did guilt, fear, or shame tip him into violence? Or was this man so broken he couldn't see any other escape? And then on April 20th, 2016, Stephen James Murray of Jacksonville, Florida, was formally charged with the murder of Father Rene Robert right here in Georgia. Stephen faced multiple charges, including malice murder, kidnapping, possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime, and auto theft. The state of Georgia filed the murder charge under its felony murder statute, based on the claim that Father Rene was killed during the commission of a felony, namely kidnapping. In the weeks following his capture, the weight of what he had done and what laid ahead began to settle in. Sitting in a jail cell in Burke County, Georgia, Stephen Murray seemed to fully grasp the finality of it all. "This is the end of the line for me," he said during a jailhouse interview. He spoke of Father Rene with a kind of stunned sorrow, as though he couldn't reconcile the man he killed with the part of him that he still saw Robert as a rare source of compassion. "I can't quite wrap my head around the fact that I killed a man who was good to me, who taught me about God," he said. And yet, for all the remorse he claimed to feel, the damage was done. A priest, a man who had only ever tried to help, was gone.
He hates himself for taking Father Rene's life.
He made it clear he wasn't asking for sympathy, though he was certainly explaining himself. "I wasn't under my right state of mind. I lost control. My dad raised me to hurt, kill, destroy." And in one of the most raw expressions of accountability, he said this: "I'm not blaming any of that or trying to get a break for what I had done. I fixed my plate, and by God, I'll eat the glass and everything." Listening to him, it's easy, almost dangerously so, to feel some sympathy for Stephen Murray. He was a product of severe trauma, addiction, and untreated mental illness, a product of his environment. But this wasn't just a sad story. It was also the story of a brutal murder, of a man of God who showed him mercy and lost his life for it. Stephen Murray was, in every sense, a walking contradiction, like a Jekyll and Hyde, switching from pitiful to predatory in a blink of an eye. And no amount of pain in his past could undo what he did in Georgia woods that very day. And as his trial inched closer, it seemed like Stephen's mental state started to spiral inside jail walls. He reportedly tried to hang himself in his cell at Clayton County Jail twice in one day, but both attempts failed. Jailers discovered a note in which the accused admitted that he no longer wanted to live or survive. And this wasn't an isolated incident. Since his arrest, Stephen had made multiple attempts on his own life, bouncing from facility to facility as sheriffs struggled to keep him contained. At one jail, he tried hanging himself with a bedsheet, even officials said. At another, he caused chaos, supposedly by breaking pipes and flooding the cells. Each transfer tells the same story, though. A restless inmate who cannot or will not adjust to life behind bars, which makes you question and wonder, was Stephen showing signs of genuine remorse or simply the desperation of a man who cannot face the punishment that he knows is coming? After his arrest, Stephen Murray pled guilty to kidnapping and murder, avoiding a very long trial. He was sentenced to life in prison. But despite that plea, prosecutors initially vowed to pursue the death penalty, a decision that directly contradicted the wishes of the man who he had murdered.
Before Murray walked out of the courtroom, Judge Blanchard said that normally they say, quote, "May God have mercy on your soul" for death penalty cases, but he said it during Murray's case. Judge Blanchard said the punishment Murray faces here on earth pales in comparison to the punishment he faces in the afterlife.
And get this. It seems like Father Rene may have actually prophesized very own death years and decades earlier. Back in 1995, more than 2 decades before his tragic death, Father Rene Robert actually signed a notarized declaration of life, insisting that if he were ever killed, his murderer should not face execution, regardless of how horrific the crime was. I request that the person found guilty of homicide for my killing not be subject to or put in jeopardy of the death penalty under any circumstances, no matter how heinous their crime or how much I may have suffered, the document read. That single sentence, signed, witnessed, and placed in his personal file, became Father Rene's final act of mercy. Even in death, he extended compassion to the man who violently ended his own life. Reading it now, one can't help but wonder, was Father Rene simply declaring his faith, or did he, in some haunting way, foresee the violent fate that had awaited him?
We never know what's going on in the heart, in the mind for a person doing a violent act. Justice needs to be joined with mercy.
Bishop Felipe Estevez is one of 3 spearheading the push to get the district attorney to spare Murray's life.
It's not necessary. We don't need to be as violent as he was.
The bishop says it goes back to the belief that 2 wrongs don't make a right.
Not only that, even if he's put to death, Father Rene will not come to life.
It's not a document that has legal force in order, that it would affect the actual prosecution of a case. For the defense to possibly use the declaration of life, whether it be through a witness that testifies, in mitigation for them, or whether it be the actual victim's family that's testifying, making a victim impact statement, notifying the jury of the decedent's wishes, could be very powerful.
Church leaders from Georgia and Florida gathered outside the Augusta courthouse to be the father's voice. They carried a petition with over 7,000 signatures urging prosecutors to honor his moral conviction. The wishes of the victim should be respected and be part of the decision making. It was violence that led to Father Rene's death. It would be tragic that there would be more violence, the death of another person for no reason. What do we accomplish? Bishop Felipe Estevez said. He was well aware of the potential violence that might have involved his ministry, but he cared for those people nonetheless, Archbishop Wilton Gregory said.
Bruce, these are the men who were close with Father Rene, some friends, others who served with him in the clergy. They want Stephen Murray to be punished, but they are pleading with the Georgia court system to not sentence him to death.
Who is the head of the Presbyteral Council, president of the Presbyteral Council.
If convicted, Mr. Murray deserves punishment for the brutal murder of Father Rene. But imposing a sentence of death as a consequence of killing only perpetuates the cycle of violence in our community.
The priests are also saying Father Rene's family does not want the death penalty, and neither would Father Rene. They say he worked with people who had criminal or troubled backgrounds, and they hope the district attorney can change her mind.
But despite the bishop's advocacy and Father Rene Roberts' unwavering stance on mercy, the case still moved forward under Georgia's capital punishment laws. Prosecutors cited 4 aggravating factors, calling the murder outrageously or wantonly vile, horrible, or inhuman. And yet, the tension remained. Can someone like Stephen Murray with a long history of trauma, drug abuse, and mental illness be both broken and dangerous, both vulnerable and guilty at the same time? Again, it's not hard to feel some sympathy for the child Stephen once was, but no amount of pain or instability can erase what he did to Father Rene, a man of God who showed him nothing but grace, even after his death. In the end, Father Rene seemed to understand what might happen to him. He didn't just serve the lost, he foresaw the risk and chose love anyway. And even after his death, he remained true to himself and to the gospel of mercy he had spent a lifetime preaching. And even within Father Rene's own family, there were conflicting emotions about how justice should be served in this case. His sister Deborah admitted that she was torn when she learned about the Declaration of Life that her brother had signed decades earlier. She understood it. On one hand, she felt that Stephen Murray should pay with his life for what he did to her brother. But on the other, she struggled to honor her brother, Father Rene's final wish, that his killer not face execution. "Part of me wants him gone," she told NBC News. "Part of me wants him to suffer for the rest of his life." She had always known her brother opposed the death penalty, in keeping with Catholic doctrine, but said she didn't realize just how deeply he felt until she saw it in writing. The discovery of this document left her feeling very conflicted. She was caught between grief, anger, and her desire to respect the man her brother once was. "I want to abide by his wishes," she said, "but it isn't my decision. I just don't know what to feel."
And Father Robert's nephew says that he's not sure if his family can ever truly forgive the man who took Father Robert's life.
I'll have to think about it for the rest of his life. I hope he does every single day. I hope he loses sleep over it every single night.
Meanwhile, Stephen's behavior in court reflected his own inner chaos. At times, he apologized and asked for forgiveness, acknowledging his mental illness. Other times, however, he lashed out publicly, saying, "Tell the world I say fuck them." His public statements were erratic, flipping between remorse and defiance. A reflection, perhaps, of a man unraveling under the weight of his actions. But in the end, the priest's final wish was honored. Nearly a year after his arrest, Stephen Murray pleaded guilty to the murder of the 71-year-old priest in a Georgia courtroom. And as part of the plea deal, prosecutors agreed to take the death penalty off the table, sentencing Stephen Murray to life in prison without the possibility of parole, along with additional time for some gun charges. It was a sentence that reflected both justice and mercy, echoing Father Rene's unwavering compassion, even from beyond the grave. Stephen Murray getting the death penalty would have been insult to injury based upon what Father Rene would have wanted, District Attorney Natalie Payne said. She acknowledged that Murray's actions were severe enough to warrant execution, but said that the priest's declaration of life and the wishes of his community carried real weight. That single document, written in peace, would later become a powerful voice in court, swaying prosecutors and sparing Stephen Murray from execution, from his death, from the man who took his life.
Stephen Murray absolutely deserved the death penalty for what he did. In this case, he's a very dangerous and violent man.
Saved Stephen Murray his life. How much of a weight did that Declaration of Life play?
A tremendous weight. I mean, like I said in court, this wasn't just a document that he executed as a result of his employment or his affiliation with the church.
You mentioned the drive up with investigators that Stephen Murray took from Jacksonville to the body. You heard what Stephen Murray said in court today. Do you believe what he said today?
No, I don't. I don't believe he's remorseful. I think if anything, Stephen Murray feels sorry for himself. But he indicated he didn't have any remorse then, and I don't believe he has any remorse now.
The outcome may not have felt like closure for some, but it honored the kind of man Father Rene was, one who gave freely to those in need, even at his own risk. He walked alone through dangerous neighborhoods. He lent his car to addicts. He scraped leftovers into bags for the homeless. Again, I'm saying this over and over, but he believed in redemption, even for the deeply broken. When reached by the Associated Press from prison, Stephen seemed to have accepted his sentence, fully acknowledging Father Rene's legacy and the mercy that he had shown him. "It's a lot of time," he said, "but I deserve it. Father Rene was a good man." And with those words, the man who took Father Rene's life acknowledged, at last, the mercy that was extended to him, the mercy that the priest himself had pleaded for long before his tragic death. Stephen Murray is currently serving his life sentence at the Special Management Unit at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson, Georgia. The SMU unit is a high-security program designed to rehabilitate close custody inmates through strict structure like education and behavioral programming, with the goal of eventually reintegrating them into the general prison population. And even in death, Father Rene Robert refused to let hate win or even have the last word. It's that unshakable compassion, stronger than violence, stronger than death itself, that became the focus of a documentary made about Father Rene's life and death, a film that looked beyond the case to the profound mark he left on the world. The award-winning documentary called Where There Is Darkness truly captures and tells more than just the story of Father Rene's tragic murder.
He walked into the lion's den every day knowing he may not come out alive. This was the one time he didn't come out.
There are obvious signs of a violent homicide.
Stephen Murray is accused of kidnapping Father Robert, forcing him to the trunk of a car, and then driving him from Florida to Georgia and murdering him.
I was filled with such rage that my Saint Rene could be hurt in such an ugly, ugly way.
If anybody really loves Father Rene, they'll forgive me because he was a man of God, and forgiveness is forgiveness.
I know my brother. My brother's not a monster.
It is a plea to spare the life of an accused killer.
An ironic twist to this case.
I was in awe.
Rene's hand reached up from the grave.
Father Robert's idea of punishment isn't the same as the state's. In 1995, he signed a
Declaration of Life, saying in part, I hereby declare that should I die as a result of a violent crime, I request that the
person or persons found guilty of homicide
not be subject to the death penalty, no matter how heinous their crime or how much they may have suffered.
That'd be just like Rene. Why would he stop his ministry just because he was dead?
It tells the story of a man who lived and died by a radical belief in mercy and grace. Father Rene was the kind of priest who gave everything he had to people, like I've been saying, most of the world ignored: addicts, ex-cons, the mentally ill. He didn't just preach compassion like most of us do. He practiced it, even when it put him and his life at risk.
This project all started with Samila Kitanakis, a filmmaker who heard about the murder of Father Rene on National Public Radio.
I remember, I don't even know how I got home because I was so in tune to the story. And I loved that it was talking about how he had forgiven 20 years before his murder.
Father Rene taught everybody that he knew not to judge anyone. And I think that's what we've probably gotten the most out of making this film.
Samila contacted fellow filmmaker Sean Bloomfield, who lives only 2 hours from St. Augustine. He had heard the story of Father Rene as well and wanted to get involved.
We are independent as independent as it gets, really, and we chose this project with no budget at the time. You know, we decided let's start, and we had no money, nothing really, except for a lot of passion.
A lot of passion over the past year and a half, researching the life of the priest and his final moments with his killer, Stephen Murray.
Come on! Say make it quick.
Sean says the community wanted this story to be told.
We never expected to get the kind of support that we've had from this community in Northeast Florida, and especially St. Augustine.
The filmmakers found an actor from out of state to portray Father Rene, and they had a few similarities.
We found a guy in Oregon, Dick, who his name is Richard Wayne, and Father Rene's name before he took Rene Robert, his name was Richard Wayne.
Dick McMahon says he turned to Father Rene for guidance on how to tell his story.
To be quite honest with you, I prayed to Father Rene once I got down here to Florida and learned a little more about him, that I could tell his story properly. I prayed to him for him to jump into my body and help me tell that story.
This project is called Where There Is Darkness, and there is meaning behind the title. It's based on the peace prayer of St. Francis.
There's a line in there, where there is darkness, let me bring the light. And for us, we felt like, you know, that could be a perfect title because Father Rene brought this light into the world, into the dark world.
The filmmakers hope when you watch it, you will understand Father Rene's final act of mercy and forgiveness.
It inspires me to be more forgiving and more to find peace in forgiving.
The film shows us that Father Rene wasn't naive like many may have thought he was. He knew that working with some troubled souls came with danger, and he knew that it possibly came with a price. But despite all that, he still chose kindness in any way, and somehow, even in death, he offered one final act of mercy. His legacy is not one of victimhood, but of quiet, powerful resistance, the kind that chooses forgiveness over vengeance. In the end, where there is darkness leaves us not just mourning a life lost, but leaving us feeling inspired by a life lived for others.
They talked about the good times, the jokes, and the smiles.
It really seemed to me like it didn't matter who you were, where you came from, what your religion was.
It didn't matter. It did not matter to him.
Yes,
he
he
loved you anyways. And that's the hardest thing, to have him taken from us, because he loves so many people. And I know he was reaching out to this gentleman, and I know a part of him loved him.
Father Rene Robert believed in showing up for the forgotten, the addicts, the incarcerated, the broken. He didn't see people as lost causes. He saw them as souls worth saving. Even when it put him and his own life in harm's way, he still answered the call of compassion and grace. And though it ultimately cost him his life, he died true to his faith, his convictions, and his God.
We're still laughing about the strange and funny things Rene did. We're generally trying to tell people, don't do what Rene did, but admire what he did, and all the values he lived by, try to incarnate them in your own life.
He had that wonderful spirit. I know it was Rene's gift to us.
Well, he was a good friend, I used to tease him. I would say to him, Father Rene, you're faster with your hands than you are with your mouth. You know, he signed for he was a signing priest, and we'd get a big kick out of that.
And he looked for the underbelly of life. When other people are trying to get up to the bridge on the Queen Mary, he was scraping barnacles.
If he were here today, like the documentary implies, Father Rene wouldn't want us to focus on how he died. He'd want us to focus on how he lived, to walk toward those that are in pain, to forgive even when it feels hard or impossible, to act with mercy even when justice demands something much harsher. His life wasn't just about service, it was about sacrifice, rooted in the belief that no one is beyond redemption. He showed us and the world that loving others fully and without fear is a risk worth taking. And now it's up to all of us to carry that light forward into the places where darkness still lives.
I believe it was a gift from my brother, Father Rene, to love and not hate, no matter what. So I, in my heart, have forgiven Stephen for taking my brother's life. I know my brother's with God, and we'll be all together someday. But you gotta let it go. You gotta let anger go and let hatred go and just love.
The story of Stephen Murray is one marked by shadows long cast from a childhood steeped in trauma, neglect, abuse, and violence. A life shaped by pain and addiction, his journey was a turbulent one, torn between moments of vulnerability and flashes of anger that threatened to consume him, and it kinda did. Yet amid this fractured existence, there was a glimmer of something deeper, an acknowledgement, however late and painful, of the man he took from the world, Father Rene Robert, a man who showed him true mercy even in death. Stephen's final words, spoken from the confines of a prison cell, carried a reluctant reverence. Father Rene was a good man, he said, a somber recognition of a kindness he had once rejected and ultimately destroyed. It's a truth that, in the end, pierced through years of anger and despair and trauma, a reluctant, somewhat tribute to a man who had offered him hope, compassion, and mercy. Father Rene, for his part, seemed to have anticipated the darkness that surrounded his fate long before it fell upon him. More than 2 decades before his death, his declaration of life, pleading that mercy be extended to his killer. A plea that was rooted in his unwavering faith and commitment to forgiveness. Even in the face of unspeakable violence, he chose compassion over vengeance, embodying the very grace that he preached every single day. Though Stephen Murray was sentenced to life in prison without parole, spared from the death penalty, as Father Rene had wished, the mercy shown to him was not one he extended in return. Yet, through it all, Father Rene's legacy remains untarnished, a beacon of kindness and forgiveness that transcends the tragedy of his final moments. His life challenges us to look beyond the darkness, to see the humanity in broken souls, and to carry forward a legacy of love, even when it demands the greatest sacrifice. Father Rene died a man of God, and in that death, in his death, his compassion lives on. A silent, enduring plea that we choose mercy, even when mercy is the hardest path to take. Father Rene's unwavering commitment to kindness, even in the face of unimaginable violence, challenges us all. His plea for mercy toward his killer, made long before tragedy ever struck, shows us that compassion can exist even in the darkest of moments. And as we reflect on his life and legacy, we are called not only to wrestle with the difficult questions of punishment and redemption, but also to carry forward a message of hope, to live with empathy, to serve others selflessly, to choose mercy when it matters the most. One thing is certain, Stephen Murray will remain behind bars in Georgia for the rest of his life, but the legacy of Father Rene Robert and the profound story his life and death tell resonates far beyond the prison walls. It exposes the deeply polarizing and morally complex nature of the justice system, as well as mercy and forgiveness. That is the enduring light Father Rene leaves behind. And it is a legacy that will continue to inspire reflection and debate, not just here in Georgia, but across the world for decades to come.